Hi, welcome to Suthichai Live English podcast. We are awaiting a decision from Washington, probably from President Donald Trump himself, about Thailand's latest proposal to reduce the rate of reciprocal tariffs. Thailand has been charged with 36%. The series of negotiations from the Thai side aims at cutting it down to 18 to 20%. Whether Thailand will succeed or not depends on whether finally President Trump will step in and make a decision or not. Dr. Kobsak Putragun, an outstanding economist and a banker, has drawn up three scenarios as to how Thailand should proceed. Of course, the worst case scenario is we have to cope with a 36% tariffs for all Thai goods into America. That would be a serious situation, and Thailand would have to find all possible means to reduce the impact. Second option would be the best case scenario, and that is that we can get say 18 to 20% tariff. But then what is the condition from the American side? Do we have to open up the whole country for American exports, as has been claimed by President Trump about the concessions from Vietnam and Indonesia? If that is the case, if Thailand has to follow that route, then we are also put in a very risky position, because a large sector, and in fact several sectors, will be affected quite seriously. Of course, the best option would be for Thailand to get only an 18% tariff, at the same time be able to protect some of the vital sectors in the Thai economy. Somewhere in between is a mixture of say up to 20-25% tariff, at the same time being able to protect some of the major industries, not all. So option 1, 2, 3, all of them will have impact, negative impact on Thailand. How do we see this, and what is Dr. Kobsak's proposal for the way forward for Thailand? Let's get Ping and Pong to dive into this. Hi, Ping and Pong.
Welcome to Suthichai Live English Podcast. I am Ping.
And I am Pong.
Today we're doing a deep dive, really getting into a critical economic challenge that Thailand's facing right now. Our mission really is to unpack this whole complex situation around their trade talks with Washington. We want to understand the immediate problems, sure, but also the possible ways forward.
That's right. And our main guide for this is a really insightful analysis from Dr. Kobsak Futrakul. He's a well-known economist, VP at Bangkok Bank, and he's laid out what he calls the way forward for Thailand in these pretty high-stakes discussions. What's interesting is he frames it not just about tariffs, but about managing unavoidable national damage. It's quite strategic.
Okay, let's dig into that. Dr. Kobsak points out something really urgent. Thailand basically has just 2 weeks left, 2 weeks to negotiate with the U.S. So that immediately brings up his big question. What should Thailand actually do? And how should they even approach these talks?
Exactly. And he defines the core problem, the kalatan, as he puts it, the puzzle to solve, as minimizing the damage that's basically inevitable. He's quite blunt that, look, whichever way they go, there's going to be some kind of damage. He breaks it down into three main areas. First, obviously, damage to the export sector. Second, damage to those parts of the economy Thailand has, protected in the past. And third, and this one's maybe a bit harder to see now, damage to the future of the Thai economy. He says this will become clearer over time.
Okay, and this next point really shows what a tough spot Thailand is in. You mentioned that 36% tariff rate.
Yeah.
Can you unpack that a bit? It's the highest among the key ASEAN nations, right?
Yeah.
Compared to Singapore, Indonesia, Vietnam.
Yeah.
All the neighbors. What does that actually mean for their bargaining power?
Well, it means they don't have many good options, frankly. That 36% is just it stands out. You've got Singapore down at 10%, Indonesia, the Philippines around 19-20%, Vietnam's at 20%, Malaysia is at 25%, and interestingly, they're talking about maybe going higher. And then India, another big competitor, they're close to a deal around 26%, maybe even lower. So yeah, that big gap puts Thailand at a serious disadvantage, not much leverage there.
Right. So that leads us to what Dr. Kobsak calls path one, basically, doing nothing or failing to negotiate and ending up stuck with that 36%. What happens then? What are the big risks?
Oh, the risks are huge, dire, really. First, massive damage straight to the export sector. And remember, exports are what, about 60% of Thailand's GDP? That's enormous. And trying to compensate that whole sector, it's really tough. People talk about this 200 billion baht fund, but Dr. Kobsak suggests it probably wouldn't be enough, especially because, customers will just switch. They'll go to suppliers in Vietnam or Indonesia where the tariffs are much lower, just business.
Okay, so a massive hit to exports. But you mentioned long-term damage too. What else happens if they land on that 36%? Where's the sort of hidden pain?
That's a really critical point he makes. The 36% tariff doesn't just hurt now, it really damages Thailand's future economic prospects. See, Thailand's already finding it a bit tough to attract these new era foreign companies. Are kind of falling behind Vietnam and Indonesia. Often investors look at those two first, and Thailand's maybe a distant third choice. Now, imagine that with a 36% tariff. Dr. Kobsak predicts companies looking to invest would probably just focus on Vietnam and Indonesia. Maybe Malaysia as a third option. Thailand would just fall off the radar for major new foreign investment. His warning is pretty stark. This path leads to total damage that would be more than we could bear. He basically says Thailand has to fight hard not to end up here.
Wow, okay. So if path one, doing nothing, leads to total damage, then the only real choice left is to negotiate, right?
Exactly.
Especially with competitors wrapping up their own deals, the pressure must be mounting.
For sure. So Dr. Kobsak outlines two main ways to approach the negotiation. Path two, he calls the Vietnam and Indonesia model. This basically means offering pretty much everything. 0% tariffs, total market access, and getting rid of non-tariff barriers too. Things like complex customs rules, quotas, stuff like that. It's the most competitive offer, but he does note it would affect, all sectors. And some might feel it's, giving away too much.
Okay. Which brings us to path three.
Yeah.
The middle ground. This sounds maybe more strategic, more balanced. How does Dr. Kobsak see this working? Like, what do you keep? What do you give up?
Yeah, the middle ground strategy is quite clever. He suggests starting with the Vietnam, Indonesia, offer that 0% in total access as a baseline. But then you very carefully figure out what Thailand genuinely cannot give away. What are the absolute red lines? You pull those specific things off the table. This means, yes, Thailand would likely end up with a slightly higher tariff than Vietnam or Indonesia, but it would be a calculated trade-off. And he has a specific target in mind for this middle ground. Aim for a tariff rate of 25%.
25%. Why that specific number? If competitors are lower, why aim for 25%? What's the thinking there?
Good question. He explains it like this. If the tariff only drops to, say, 30%, you still have a 10 or 11% gap compared to competitors. That's still really hard for exporters to overcome, and it doesn't make Thailand look super attractive for investment. But at 25%, the gap narrows to maybe 5 or 6%. That, he argues, is manageable. The private sector can adapt. The export sector can still operate, maybe reducing the need for huge government bailouts or compensation, and crucially, attracting foreign investment is still possible. Companies won't just write Thailand off, they'd still consider it.
Okay, a 5-6% gap sounds better, but still a gap. Does Dr. Kobsak mention any specific areas that might still find it tough, even at 25%? And how could the government help bridge that remaining gap for investors?
He doesn't really single out specific industries, but acknowledges, yes, there will still be some damage. It's about minimizing it, remember? And that's where the government comes in. He suggests they could offset that remaining 5-6% difference for investors. How? By doing things like cutting energy costs, streamlining regulations, reducing other fees, basically making it cheaper or easier to do business in Thailand in other ways. So this middle ground path, path 3, yes, there's still some damage, but it's hopefully manageable damage. Exports are hurt, but not crippled. The long-term future isn't completely sacrificed. Both exports and investment remain, viable sources of government revenue. And that 200 billion baht compensation fund they've talked about, it would likely be enough, and maybe they could phase it out over time as businesses adjust. So he concludes this is probably the option that causes the least long-term damage.
Interesting. Okay, switching gears slightly. There was some talk recently sort of floated publicly about a completely different idea offering a military base, presumably to the U.S., as a kind of bargaining chip. What's Dr. Kobsak's view on that?
Oh, he shoots that down pretty firmly. A strong rejection. He argues it would be incredibly detrimental. Why? Because it would seriously hurt Thailand's ability to attract investment. Businesses generally don't want to set up shop in places seen as potential conflict zones or military targets. It just creates too much risk and uncertainty. He calls it great damage. You might get some short-term gain, maybe, but the long-term damage to Thailand's future economic prospects would be significant. So, bottom line from him, not a good option. Definitely not.
Okay, so wrapping this up. We've looked at the tight deadline, the really bad outcome of doing nothing, and these negotiation paths, with Dr. Kobsak's analysis pointing pretty clearly towards the strategic middle ground as the best bet to limit the long-term harm.
Exactly. And what's really fascinating here, I think, is how this whole situation just highlights how vital it is for a country to be really clear about its strategic goals and to weigh those long-term consequences, the trade-offs in these kinds of big global negotiations. Like he says, it's often not about avoiding all damage, because sometimes you just can't. It's about managing it smartly, choosing the path that keeps you viable.
So it leaves you thinking, doesn't it? How does a nation make those calls? Weighing the immediate hit against the potential future and deciding, how much pain is acceptable now to protect what comes later? How much is too much to sacrifice for just short-term relief? Thank you for following Suthichai Live English Podcast. Stay tuned for the next episode.